Everybody, we finally have some great news around the fourth stimulus check. According to CNN, the Federal Reserve is getting ready to roll back its massive stimulus. Good news, folks, we're about to receive more stimulus payments from the federal government. That's if President Biden decides to sign this bill into law.
Millions of other Americans get. The Medicaid coverage gap has left low-income Americans.
So the Federal Reserve is not ready to take its foot off the stimulus gas pedal yet. If the economic recovery continues to progress as expected, more stimulus payments might be sent out. And now it's the Fed's job to keep prices stable and achieve maximum employment. Over the past months, Jerome Powell had said that more progress was needed on those fronts until a change in policy is warranted. Jerome Powell actually told reporters, while the test for inflation is already met, the test for employment is all but met. Due to the unemployment benefits being cut and due to many people being unemployed, the Fed does want to send out more stimulus payments.
Would you cut? But our goal is to have a very specific priorities clearly presented with as close as possible results as possible. And I'm very, very proud of the work.
And everybody, as I said in my previous videos, some states and some counties are giving their residents a state stimulus payment. For instance, in the city of Cleveland, Ohio, they've announced a plan for federal stimulus spending. Cleveland city officials addressed residents during a virtual briefing, and they discussed several spendings of the federal stimulus funds. $511 million will be sent out to Cleveland residents. Yes, everybody, Cleveland residents, some people are getting state stimulus checks. But is your state doing the same thing? Have you received a state stimulus check yet, or a city stimulus check?
As chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, I want to say a few words about some of the important budgetary issues that Congress is now facing.
So everybody, last year California was able to run a budget surplus, meaning the state has to afford extra stimulus payments outside the federal packages, and they are part of the wider $100 billion California Comeback Plan. As of the August data, California has one of the highest unemployment rates in the United States, standing at 7.5%. And for the second Golden State stimulus, the eligibility requirement is those earning up to $75,000 a year. This is much greater than the $30,000 eligibility limit for the first round of checks. You must also be a tax resident of California for more than half of the 2020 tax year. Receiving it is simple. Make sure that you have filed your 2020 tax return. The tax board advises that if you are a resident, there is nothing you need to do to qualify for the stimulus payment other than simply file your tax return by the October 15th deadline. If you live in California and want to see if you qualify, the tax board has a tool that you can use there. Only 650,000 people could receive the first check, but they are not eligible to receive the second. Those who receive the first can only access the second payment if they noted their dependents on their tax return. They can receive $500 per dependent up to a maximum of $1,000. Now, qualifying residents will receive an extra $600 or $500 depending on income and how many dependents that they can claim. Now, residents who claim at least one dependent will receive an additional $500, meaning they will receive a total of $1,500, $1,100 total. Additional funding must be found before September 30th to ensure that the federal government is able to continue paying its bills, assuming that the Democrats cannot force through a suspension of the debt ceiling at that time. And on Tuesday, the House voted to approve a bill that will both fund the government through December and suspend the debt ceiling until the end of 2022. But Democrats will face a much tougher task getting approval from the Senate. A government shutdown would occur if the federal government is unable to keep paying for some non-essential offices, typically due to a delay in the approval of a budget for the upcoming fiscal year. Now, agencies that are essential, like health agencies for instance, will remain functioning, but the majority of federal workers may be furloughed or risk going without a paycheck. So folks, President Biden must send out the fourth stimulus check. Now, each year the federal government's fiscal calendar runs from October 1st to September 30th, hence the end of the month deadline for budget negotiations. A shutdown of even a few weeks can have catastrophic consequences for the national economy, and they have become more frequent in recent years, possibly due to an increasingly partisan Congress. Now, both parties want to avoid a government shutdown, but at least one will have to compromise on the current position. Democrats have passed a funding bill in the House, but it includes a provision to raise the debt ceiling, something that the Republicans appear very unlikely to support. And Mitch McConnell is thought to be willing to support a clean bill, meaning one free of any policies other than those necessary to avoid the impending shutdown. It remains to be seen, everybody, which side, if any, will be willing to budge before the end of the month. After weeks of rising tensions among congressional Democrats, President Biden stepped in Wednesday to personally attempt to resolve divisions that were threatening to tear the Democratic caucus apart and tank President Biden's domestic agenda. Biden hosted key members of at least 4 warring factions of congressional Democrats on Wednesday afternoon.
State for the Bureau of Oceans and International Environmental and Scientific Affairs. I've known Monica for more than 30 years and can say without a shred of doubt that she is the most qualified and competent candidate to fill this position. She has worked for decades across multiple administrations on issues of environmental law and policy. She understands well the interconnected world we live in and knows the 21st century U.S. foreign policy goes not simply beyond the water's edge, but to the seas and the skies and the sands of the world where universal threats and their solutions lie. Monica is a proven public servant through and through. Over the years, she's fought for what matters most. For example, during her time at the Defense Department, she worked to end discriminatory practices against women in the military, to provide them with opportunities that were previously closed to them simply because of their gender. After her time at DOD, she continued the track record of fighting for what's most important by calling out the connection between illegal wildlife trafficking and organized criminal networks confronting illegal fishing that is too often tied to global piracy and human rights violations. Her expertise in globe-spanning threats to our national security are exactly why former Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta and the Center for Strategic and International Studies have turned to her as an expert and advisor, because she knows that we can't protect ourselves at home without a robust strategy abroad. Throughout her career, she has proven to be a pragmatic and solutions-focused public servant by working across the aisle and with stakeholders from different states and industries in the United States to find ways to protect our oceans and our ocean economy. After the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, Monica collaborated with 5 Republican governors of affected states to get $1 billion in restoration funds from oil company BP so that states could quickly start rebounding from the disaster. Her work at NOAA was praised by groups like the Seafood Harvesters of America, who support her experience and legacy of protecting our oceans and the workers and communities that depend upon them. Louis Pasteur once said, "Science knows no country because knowledge belongs to humanity and is the torch which illuminates the world. Science is the highest personification of the nation because that nation will remain the first